10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of This Is HCD. My name is Gerry Scullion and I'm a human-centred design practitioner based in Dublin, Ireland. In this episode, we caught up with Gerry McGovern, one of the most well-known and loved customer experience advocates. Gerry has developed a number of fantastic models over the years, such as Top Tasks, and also curates and creates one of the best weekly experience design newsletters on the internet. I'll add links to the show notes for both of those. Gerry's been described by the Irish Times as one of the 5 visionaries who has had a major impact on the development of the web. He's a fantastic speaker, and by the time this episode gets released, will have completed 3 of the 4 dates as closing keynote speaker on Jeffrey Zellman's and Event Apart conferences in the US. Gerry has written 6 books, one of which came across my desk a number of years ago by Gerry Gaffney in Melbourne. The 3 Gerrys, all Irish and all doing something pretty similar. So going back to this episode, we discuss trust and we cover off what is trust to Gerry, the role of trust in society and in relation to the exchanges between customers and organisations. We speak about how customers have evolved at an exponential rate that exceeds that of organisations, and now organisations are playing catch up. This is a big conversation and is jammed packed with information. It was quite bizarre that we actually caught up only a few miles from where I grew up in a hotel lobby, so if you hear the jingle jangle of glasses or the distant sound of Van Halen music in the background, that should explain it. So anyway, let's jump straight in. Gerry McGovern, a very warm welcome to the This Is HCD podcast.
Thanks very much, Gerry. Yeah.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about you, which is great because you're here. But how would you describe yourself in terms of being a practitioner?
Yeah, I suppose what somebody described me there recently as almost an extreme champion of the customer.
Yeah, that's better. I had a customer-centric guru, but an extreme champion is probably
and I'm not so sure if they were being positive or negative when they said it. They were introducing me to a bunch of other managers in the building, and so, you know.
For anyone who doesn't or hasn't signed up for Gerry's newsletter, I'm going to put a link in the show notes to sign up. It's one of the best resources for customer centricity on the internet. And I'm not just saying that because you're sitting opposite me, but I've been a long time reader. Gerry, when I was researching for this episode, I was really intrigued by your background. I know you've worked as a rock journalist for Hot Press, which really spiked my interest. And you've been involved in the early stages of the web. I know the Irish Times voted you one of the top 5 influencers for the web. And we could speak a little bit more about your business with NUA, which is another interesting thing. I told you, I've done my research. All amazing experiences, I'm sure, but I'm keen to involve how you got to where you are today.
I was a freelance journalist back in the early 90s. So in other words, I was starving. And I was kind of looking for something to really focus on, or kind of to... I remember as a child, I used to sneak down at night and watch the westerns, and I'd see the wagons going out west. And I was so envious because I thought, I'll never get a chance to go out west. There is no west left.
When you're from Longford.
Yeah, in Longford anyway, certainly. Yeah, maybe the west of Ireland. But I kind of made myself a promise. I said, if you ever see those wagons going out west, you got to get on them. And the first time I came across the web, it was definitely the NCSA Mosaic, because I remember soon after, a couple of people I knew, there was a big conversation about the Netscape was released. So it was very early, and the first time I saw it, I thought, this is amazing, you know. I thought, this is the wagons going out west, you know. And I thought, this is something that you can really do something with and be part of. And so I'd found, in a way, a purpose to be useful.
Yeah, an empowerment.
You know, and so one way or another, from about 93, 94, I remember I'd interviewed a a government minister, or was a director, somebody working in a department. He was called a national software director at that stage. He's no longer around. And I wrote back to him, so I had his address or his phone number. And I wrote to him or rang him, and I said, you should really do something about this thing called the internet.
Yeah.
And he actually got back to me and says, well, why don't you do a report? So that was
the start.
That was the start. That was about 94 or so, and that report was launched in the beginning of 96. It was called Ireland, the Digital Age, the Internet. And so that allowed me to do loads of research and really get to talk to people. And from that, we founded New. There was three of us, Niall O'Sullivan and Anton O'Loughlin were the other two. And that's how it kind of got going.
Yeah. One of the early adopters of the internet really in Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, I remember myself and Niall taking two phone directories or the yellow pages or the golden pages or whatever it was, and I said to him, you take A to M and I'll take N to a Z, and we rang every business we could find, and 97% had never even heard of anything, and the other 2 or 3% had absolutely no interest. So we rang, I think, every business in Ireland, and we didn't get a single piece of business out of it. So it was hard days in 95, 96, 97 to try and get anything going in Dublin.
And I guess you've kind of followed that thread of like zero adoption through to like where we're currently at globally. I know you work globally with organisations who've got mild appetites for the internet, and you're kind of seeing that through at the moment. You're working with those clients.
All sorts of, it's like you go to certain countries and you think they're super advanced, but you'll find sectors or elements that are not advanced at all. So it's all the future, the past, the present is everywhere at the same time. And then you get to certain areas where, in a way, you almost make yourself redundant in that organisations totally get it, or they're bringing teams in-house. So things are constantly changing or shifting in relation to how do you still deliver value and offer something that people still want to pay for.
Absolutely. Which brings us into the next segue in the conversation, which is the book, which I read a couple of years ago, probably 2 years ago, was it when Transform came out? And I've actually bought this book a couple of times. I was speaking to you before we started recording.
Thank you very much.
It's called Transform, A Rebel's Guide to Digital Transformation. Now, my question for you is, why digital and not just transformation?
Yeah, and why even transformation and not continuous improvement? Yeah. I suppose we're always somehow trying to get a handle on some sort of way to try and describe things.
Yeah.
And as soon as you describe things, in a way it's redundant. And I suppose maybe it's a basic attempt to say we need to change because the world is changing. Like I say in the book, customers are changing, organisations are not. Or if you go back 40 or 50 years ago, organisations were the genuine innovators, and they were doing things that customers were going, wow, that's amazing. But now if you look at a typical person, they've got better tools than most employees in most companies. They've got access to, if they want to set up a Slack account, or if they want to set up a high-rise account, or if they want to, talk to their family with Skype or whatever. So they've got tools of communication and organisation that are often significantly better than the in-house crap tools that most people have. So you've got this anomaly, whereas if you look back 5 or 6 centuries, what was the purpose of an organisation? To be more sophisticated than the mob, of people out in the street. But now the people out in the street are often more coherently structured and more able to rapidly adapt to change than the big organisations. So organisations are in this strange moment of when most of them are actually way behind the times.
Yeah.
And the customer's racing ahead. So it's a kind of saying that, it's the rebel's guide. How do you change this organisation, most of which don't want to change?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's 2 points in there. One, you speak a little bit about the rebel. And what I'm keen to drill into a little bit more is like, who is the rebel typically in the organisation, and what kind of problems are they currently having that you've found?
Well, the rebel is the person who's saying, we got to organise around the customer. We got to make this simpler. We got to make this easier. Because if we don't make it simpler and easier, people won't buy it. People won't use it. And that's a rebellious act. And that a huge number of people over the years I've noticed who have done that get in trouble in their organisation because they're going back to the developers or the managers saying, no, it's not ready to release. It's not, or maybe it's released, but it's not right. We still need to make it better, etc. No, we need to rewrite that. No, that design is not simpler enough. No, that's not working. You need to change that process. And essentially the organisation is saying, hello, you know, stop. You know, this is costing more. This is you're really annoying.
Yeah, and the good people tend to leave at that point.
Well, they either get fired.
Yeah.
Or I've seen so many environments where the people who are saving the bloody organisation get fired, or else they hit a ceiling and they end up leaving through frustration or whatever. So you get no thanks for a lot of this work because the organisation wants to believe the easy myths of, you know, it's still powerful, it still can do whatever it wants, you know, it can create crap products and then do beautiful marketing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with the bit that we're talking about, the UXers and the service designers creating value, there's a bit in your book where you speak about how the customer is transformed and the customer is different, and they've become more empowered through the development of the internet, and they've got knowledge and they've got information at their fingertips. But organizations are still lagging behind. So one of the methodologies that you've created is called Top Tasks, which has been around for
15 years.
15 years. I was going to say 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
But tell us a little bit more about Top Tasks and how that helps organizations close the gap between the existing customer sort of baseline and where organizations are at.
Most organizations have become so tribal, so inner-looking that they don't really know their customers. Or, you know, we were talking there earlier, saying, we can't talk to our customers. We've got relationship managers. They're not even allowed to talk to their customers. Yeah. And so less and less people within the organisation have any interaction with their customers. So they build up these myths of assumptions, or sometimes I know it can be good, but a lot of times I find it's bad. Personas. They invent the fictional customers that they think, etc. So the Top Task method is specifically designed for you to actually discover what really your customers want, what they need, but equally what they don't need, what they don't want. So it's a kind of to give you a map or a league table of importance. Here's the critical stuff that they really want, and here's the stuff that they don't want. So the top tasks and what I call the tiny tasks. And then what we often do is we do a similar, so we develop the task environment. Here's all the stuff in choosing a university and dealing with your health and buying a car, whether it's for Toyota or whatever. And then we give the same set of tasks to the organisation staff, and we say, well, vote on these as well and see what you think your customers want.
Nice.
And then we can statistically analyse the two votes and say, listen, there's a huge gap between what you think your customers want and what customers actually want. So that it's a basic statistical method of creating a league table of customer hierarchy of importance, customer needs, tasks, whatever you want to call them, services, the stuff people want to do.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the voice of the business, voice of the customer, and you're trying to see the dissonance between the two.
The dissonance between, and the clarity of, here's, let's say in an environment, there might be 100 tasks that would define dealing with your health. So prognosis, diagnosis, where to go for help, stuff you need to do. So let's say if there was 100 tasks, this is a pattern that we've seen happen in 400 or 500 organisations, 300,000-400,000 people voting in 28, 30 languages, etc. The top 5 tasks will get as much of the vote as the bottom 50. So you get this absolute
clarity of
here's the stuff that truly matters and here's the stuff that doesn't matter. And in essence, the top task is a management model which says, well, if these are the top 5 services, this is the stuff you need to excel at.
Yeah.
If you don't get these 5 services right, you're on rocky foundations. Whereas what most organisations are doing, they're actually focusing on what's at the bottom of the list. You know,
the long tail, so
the
to
long
speak.
tail.
Yeah.
And the long tail is a good idea when the top tasks are working.
Yeah.
But if the top tasks are crap, like if you're trying to book a meeting room work really well for a hotel, when book a bedroom sucks, you know, you're not going to get very far.
Yeah.
So you got to make sure, first and foremost, book a bedroom works exceptionally well. Then focus on book a meeting room. But most organisations I'm dealing with, they're focusing on book a meeting room, and they said, there is a book a bedroom. We haven't touched it in 5 years. Well, recipe for disaster.
Absolutely. And I know we're speaking a little bit about the disconnect between the organisation and the customer, and that's led to the breakdown in trust, which is really what this episode is about. It's about the collapsing of trust in the customers globally. What I'm keen to hear is like the top tasks methodology is one way of surfacing that to the senior executives in the board. But what can designers do typically to help bring that conversation up?
Yeah, of course, it's the challenge that I'm sure you've faced, that none of us live in an isolated world. So if you're exploiting your customer, particularly your current customers, with overcharging. So most models in financial or whatever, the longer you stay with the organisation, the more they charge you. So how do you create a great customer experience when you're screwing your customers?
Yeah.
So we hit these barriers that you can't design around. So as we find, if we truly want to solve these problems, they're whole of organisation behaviours, which then we say, well, we can't do that. So how do we work within a limited environment? So we do the best we can. But if you're deliberately trying to make pricing opaque, because if you made it transparent, people would then say, well, you're charging me twice as much as you're charging a new customer. So in many organisations, unfortunately, they want pricing to be opaque, because if they made it transparent and clear, if they simplified the actual renewal process, people would see they're getting screwed. So customers are much more aware of that now, because they can go to comparative websites. You go back 20 or 30 years ago, you renewing your car insurance or whatever. And of course, it's all designed that way. You get out and it looks like, I'm getting a 60% no claims bonus and it looks brilliant. They're treating me really well. And I was with one car insurer, either AXA or whatever. I was with them for 10 years and I was so busy, I was travelling, etc. And then when I finally checked, they were charging me twice as much as I could get elsewhere from me. But I felt I was getting a great deal because they had designed it. They says, you're stupid, you're not going to check, so we're going to screw you. So how do you design around that? And I think it's very difficult to do that. So I think then you got Slack, an organisation at Slack that says, you got 50 people who have signed up for the payment model and 5 of them are not using the service. We're sending you a discount.
Nice.
Then the SAS company's gone, you can't do that. That's how we make our profit, by the people who don't use the system.
Yeah.
Because their business model is unscrewing you.
Yeah.
Whereas it's a kind of saying that in the world of where the customer is not so much king, they're dictator, they've got much more information, actually being fair, being simple, delivering good service is a good business model.
Yeah.
You can actually be successful. Amazon, it may be a load of black spots in the way it treats a lot of its people, but it treats customers fairly.
Ethically.
It actually treats customers, like anytime you've got a problem or stuff like that. And of course now they've got models where people are giving them the keys to their cars.
Yeah.
Amazon are delivering to your boot
and the keys to the house as well.
And the keys to the house, because, hey, this is a company I trust in the process. So there is a business model for being fair. To this new world of customers that is out there, that is looking to be treated fairly. And of course, fair is not enough. You got to deliver value. You got to get it there quickly. But if you're actually fair with your current, I think the big revolution is with the current customers.
Yeah. The emerging customers, the customers they haven't won yet.
Forget about the actual customers you have.
Yeah.
I think if you look at most organisations, most of their strategy is focused on the promise to the potential customer, and they totally neglect their current customer. I mean, what do they do to their current customer? They outsource or they automate. The less we speak to them, the better. They see the current customer as being captured and as trapped.
Yeah.
Whereas the clever customers, how did Slack grow? Current customers.
Yeah.
This is really easy to use. Tell your friend. It wasn't the CIO who got Slack. It was the 200 engineers who then went to the CEO and said, you better get a license.
You need to pay for this, yeah.
Yeah, you better, and if you look at Amazon, you look at Google, you look at Facebook, who advertises? It's companies like Yahoo who are out of business now.
Yeah.
They're the people you see in the companies that you can't understand how to bloody use the thing, so they have to advertise the thing. But Google's or Amazon's, they have built Amazon Prime. Their models are built on looking after their customers, so their current customers become the champions in the social space.
Absolutely.
They become the marketers. So I think the shift is focusing on your current customer and delivering them such an amazing experience that they champion you to their friends, etc. So they become your marketing engine.
Yeah. So we could touch a little bit about, I suppose I wasn't going to include the marketing aspect, but I'm really keen to hear your understanding of what's the role of marketing then in terms of getting the new customers. If they're not going to focus on the acquisition of new customers, what does marketing do then? The traditional marketing, I mean, or...
Well, what marketing does is indirect. For years I've said offline marketing is about getting attention. So you'll still have some, nothing ever is any total one shift to another.
Yeah.
You move from radio to TV, you still have radio. So you'll still have traditional offline strategies, but offline marketing is essentially about getting attention. But online marketing is about giving attention, right? So marketing should be saying, how do we create an amazing experience for our current customers? How do we help and how do we communicate that? Because how do we create an army of marketers?
Yeah, I know a lot of UX people would probably argue and say, well, we're responsible for delivering that excellent experience and not marketing.
Yeah, well, that's tribal talk.
Yeah.
So the best solutions anywhere are inherently collaborative and multifunctional and multidisciplinary, right? Marketing has a lot of people and has a lot of budget. And instead of getting in the way, as it is in a lot of cases, if we champion and harness those skills and change the thinking. So nobody should be seen about winning the game on their own. So the more alliances we can create within the organisation, the more everybody wins within the organisation, the more likelihood winning is to occur in the first place. The more it's only UX win or it's only advertising, the more we have the old school thinking in the process.
Absolutely. I'm just going to take the conversation back a little bit, and we're discussing trust effectively in the broader scheme here. But if you had to describe trust, what is trust to you?
Well, trust is a kind of the oil that lubricates the economy. So if you look at very low trust societies, the economy moves in a very turgid, difficult way, and it becomes family-based or whatever, because distrust is what you get charged to do business. So if I distrust you, I'll check you up, or we'll have to get in a contract, or no, I'm not going to pay you now. So in two people who distrust each other, basically it takes much longer to do a transaction. Typically, right? Two people who trust each other, the transaction can be much more seamless, much less steps in the you're only going to talk with my lawyer, I'll talk with your lawyer, blah, blah, blah. We don't trust each other. So we need a lot of law and we need a lot of regulation. So distrust is the cost of doing business. So the more distrust, the greater the cost. However, the way you can get around trust is through use.
Yeah.
So if you make something so easy to use that the benefit of the convenience is so great, then often trust is not as important. It's kind of displaced. If you think about it, you don't trust Uber. I mean, would you trust Uber management? But who do you trust? You trust the people who use Uber. So we use Uber, number one, because it's really easy to use and it makes it easier to get in and out of that taxi. But number two, because people like us have said, yeah, that taxi driver is safe. So we've displaced, or not so much rechanneled trust away from I trust the company to I trust the people who actually use the service.
Yeah.
So again, it's that shift towards the consumer. We've managed to find, through technology, models of divining customer trust. So customer trust was like a type of oil. There was originally oil was just underneath the ground in Saudi Arabia. Then after 40 years, they find it in Canada in shale, and they have techniques to kind of get into that shale-based oil, which was very difficult to get.
Yeah.
So the customers like shale oil.
Yeah.
It was very hard to get at 40 years ago. But now, because of the web and networks, we can actually
tap into it.
We can tap into customer trust among ourselves that was very difficult to tap into 40 years ago.
Yeah. I know we were speaking a little bit more about I don't want to call it a Facebook scandal, but definitely I think they're suffering a case of mistrust or distrust at the moment. But yet their revenue has now just proven in the last month it's actually gone up.
Yeah.
What does that say about the customer's trust in relation to revenue?
What it says is a couple of things. What it says is immaturity. What it says
of who?
Of the customer. Like, Facebook is a customer-obsessed company. The thing is, they know their customers so well, they know everything. Customer obsession can become stalking, like obsession can be good and bad, But what we have from the customer's point of view is basically a kind of make it easy for me, I'm easy. And a kind of a false accounting in most people's mind, because as many people have said, when it's free, you're the product.
Yeah.
So people say, what can Facebook make of a customer every month? €20, €30. Facebook knows how much you can make off us, right?
Yeah.
And what would it cost if they actually charged us for all the services?
On a month by month?
On a month by month.
I know Sheryl Sandberg is talking about this at the moment.
Obviously a lot less, right?
Yeah.
Because otherwise they wouldn't be making billions.
Yeah.
So if they can make €30 off us, at most it's costing them 10, so they've got a profit of 20. We look and they say to us, hey, we'll give you this thing for free. And we're going, oh, that's amazing. Not realising that we're actually essentially handing them €20 a month.
Absolutely.
Right? So we don't realise the value of our own data, right? We're suckers. We're the suckers in there's a guy walks into the pub and he says, I'll buy you 2 pints for free, but you've got to drive me home. And we go, oh, that's a great deal. We have to drive him 100 miles home. We think we've got a great deal because it's cost us €20 in petrol and our own time. But we think we got this amazing deal because he bought us 2 pints.
Do you think I know there's a lot of food for thought in this one topic on its own, but a lot can be applied back to how we research and the ethical approach of how we opt in. I think people don't really understand the power of the data.
They don't.
Because they don't understand. They don't understand.
When we've driven this guy home 6 or 7 nights, we'll begin to think, it's not as good a deal as I thought it was. So I think there needs to be more of these Trumpian moments or, of exploitation of data. So this will hit Facebook, I am sure.
Yeah.
But there'll be a lag in it, and maybe they'll be ready for it when they. So maybe it'll be 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. But sooner or later, people are going to realise, hey, this isn't such a good deal as I thought it was.
Yeah.
Or they'll realise the value, the inherent value, used to be in my labour, but now it's in my data. There's as much or more value in my data as in my sweat.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The sweat equity, the data equity.
The byproduct, yeah.
And people begin to recognise that I've got a lot of data equity, or I've got a lot more than I thought I had.
Absolutely. So this is a brilliant segue into what comes after this period of distrust.
Well, there's the shift in trust, and of course then there's the exploitation. So the shift in trust has shift to peers. So now we've got the bots who are pretending to be our peers. Mm-hmm. So now they're really exploiting the peer-based trust. And will that destroy peer-based trust? The bot armies, and then where will trust next go? Or can we protect peer-based trust? Because trust has shifted. And even if we go to doctors who we claim we trust, 95% of people, but then 60 or 70% will go home and check it up on the internet.
Google, yeah.
So I think there are different types of trust. If you go back when we were children, most Irish people had essentially blind trust. We blindly trusted the church. We blindly trusted teachers, government, doctors. And blind trust is the basis of corruption and the basis of abuse of power, because anybody who's blindly trusted says, you're a chump.
Yeah.
Of course I'll exploit you because you're an idiot. Because whatever I say to you, you do it. So even good people become corrupted by blind trust in the process. So now we're coming into a more world of I'll trust but verify. Which I think...
Tell me what that means.
Well, it means I'll give you the credit of the doubt, but I'll check it out.
Yeah.
I'll actually accept what you're saying to me and I'll do it a bit, but I'll go home and I'll check. I'll do a search. I'll verify.
Yeah.
Is this the right tablet to be on? Because we see all this stuff coming in the medical entities and this scandal about smear tests. I mean, this is just the 1600 medical scandal. And the reason why it is as it is Irish people accepted what the medical institutions said to them. Medical institutions behave, and surgeons and consultants, they behave like gods.
Yeah.
They behave with a deep arrogance, a kind of, how dare you even remotely question me, who is the consultant? And of course, they make mistakes like everybody else. And then they've got the medical council who protects them. It's like a cabal, it's like a little mafia of medical entities in Ireland. And now they're being challenged. Now we're shining the light on them. And they don't like it. Well, they're going to have to get used to it.
Yeah, because that's the period of change.
Yeah, that's the...
For anyone listening globally, like basically we were discussing here, there was a case in the court this week where a lady had a smear test 4 or 5 years ago, and it was missed that she had, I think it was a tumour of some sort that was growing, and she's basically terminally ill and unsavable in some ways, and she won, I think it was 2.6 million in the court.
But they found hundreds like these.
But now they found 150 other cases like
systematic, because, these people in power feel omnipotent. They're untouchable. Well, they're not untouchable anymore. And, this wave of people power.
Absolutely.
People are more educated, they're more skeptical, they're more cynical, they're less willing to accept, they're more questioning. It's messy, but it's great.
Yeah. So what does this mean for, I guess, the future of design, service design? Because I don't think this is representative of an organisational dysfunction. Is it representative of other things?
Well, it's representative of a new type of organisation that is not parasitical.
Yeah.
If you have essentially a model that is either patriarchal or exploitative or parasitic. We've got these dumb people. Look at the biggest brands. Pepsi and Coke, what do? They give you diabetes and they make you fat.
Yeah.
Right? Or else they sell you shit food, salty snacks or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And because they do this amazing branding, we think they're this extraordinary thing that's doing us good. A huge amount of the economies are based on exploiting our stupidities and our emotional, if I have a Coke, I'll get a girl. All the cool people drink Coke. Like it's exploiting our emotional, deep stupidities, right? And it's not that we're all stupid and clever, but we're becoming more clever. We're still stupid, but we're not as easy to fool.
Yeah.
We still can be fooled. So there's models now which says, treat people well, deliver great services, make it easy. Government, we're talking about interaction. Why did they create that complexity? Because that's job security.
Well, it's job security, but it's also representative of the organisational structure, and they've replicated the products. We were speaking about MyGov earlier on in Ireland. There's an attempt to consolidate a lot of the entities into a single entity, and without going into too much detail, I'm having some trouble with trying to get things set up over here because I've just relocated from Australia. But whose fault is that? Well,
you said the replication, the organisational structure, and you're right. But how did those organisational structures evolve in the first place? They evolved from a point of view of we're now part of government, we're superior, we're in control of you.
Self-serving.
Yeah, rather than self-service.
Yeah, this is quite funny because I was about to quote Gerry McGovern to Gerry McGovern. I think he wrote about this in a newsletter, didn't you?
Oh, probably. Yeah. But I mean, basically, they... from traditional Ireland, where, government was in control of you, the priests were in control of you, the doctors were in control of you. And now we're in a new Ireland where there's a lot more Gerrys like us who are calling BS, and saying, hey, that's not acceptable anymore. You don't need to send me through 17 steps. The reason you send you through 17 steps is to actually give them job security and give them sense of power and control, etc. And because they never really think about the person who's using the system. It's all about how do we make it easier internally, etc. And how do we keep our job security? Well,
absolutely.
Now government has a crisis of legitimacy because people are looking at government and saying, what good is government? Government just makes my life miserable. It doesn't deliver good services. I've got Amazon, I've got Google. If I search in Google, I get better stuff about government than if I search on a government website. So why can't Google be the government in the future? So what we'll see happening is government being stripped of all the services that it can be stripped of. Right? And it'll be left with the roads and the potholes.
Yeah.
And it'll be left with all the expensive, the stuff that nobody else wants or that they can't turn a profit.
Absolutely.
So if government doesn't change, because government people say to me, well, they got to deal with us. I say, no, they don't. In most environments, somebody else will take that, or else you'll get a Donald Trump.
Yeah.
You'll get people more and more disillusioned with government delivering value and being up to date, and you'll get these populist reactions over time to government. So government can't afford to sit there saying, well, they have to deal with us.
Someone else is going to take control of this problem. It's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about what comes after trust as being privatisation and opportunities for other businesses to step in and replicate almost government's responsibilities.
Well, they freed the data, that the data gets freed, so people would say, no, I can present this data in a
better way.
In a better way. So I'll siphon off all the nice stuff, and then government will be left with the really expensive stuff that nobody else wants.
Yeah, one of the big things that I've noticed since I've come back home, sorry to harp on about, I've come back from Australia, but there's a lot of differences. But one of the things, it's a cultural thing, and when I left Ireland, people were, I guess, a little bit more weathered with the recession, and they were accepting things. They were just like, well, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Now, when I've come back, people are screaming, and when something's not working, they're just like, go and tell them. And it's something like I guess service designers particularly were an absolute nightmare to go shopping with, and we're a nightmare to go, because everything is being monitored as I go through those experiences. But it's a cultural thing that I noticed, and it's something really important. If you're not happy, stand up, speak, shout.
If you think when we were kids, and if our parents brought us to a restaurant, and if the food was bad, you'd be chewing on leather meat, and you'd be saying, "Just it must be my teeth," or I don't know, I must go see the dentist, or and you'd be so totally embarrassed. You wouldn't say a thing. And today you can't get better service if you don't have narky customers.
I know. One of my friends in Australia was telling me he's lived in Germany, and he goes for a meal in Australia, in Sydney, and they're like, "How was your food?" And everyone around the table goes, "It was fine.
Yeah.
But when he goes back to Germany, he was like, "How was your food?" And he was like, "Well, the steak was about 5 degrees under." It wasn't cooked to my specification. And they're like, "Okay, cool. Well, we'll refund you for that."
Yeah.
And it just says something more about the culture.
And it's probably somewhere in the middle we need.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want too much of that.
Yeah.
Otherwise everyone will go bust.
Yeah.
But I've got a couple of questions from the Slack community, and it's more talking a little bit more about top tasks.
Yeah.
I'm going to drop a link into the show notes about top tasks, about how you can learn more about it. But Jussi Passanen, who is the lead UX consultant at ANZ, one of the big banks in Australia, on the Slack channel said, I wanted to know about other alternatives to top tasks and what you've seen in organisations. They might have seen resistance to top tasks, and organisations are using their own methodologies, and if you can name any, and why they think that there was resistance to the adoption of top tasks.
Well, there's resistance because, again, it's a cultural thing. If the organisation, the essential difference is that you go to most websites and it's what we want to tell you, or promises for potential customers or whatever. Whereas top tasks tend to be more oriented towards current customers because they're the greatest.
Yeah.
You've far more current customers, unless you're a startup, than you have potential customers. So top task tends to be more oriented towards the current customer base when you go out and do it. So you get a lot of resistance from traditional marketing or traditional management figures who feel, no, we'll tell you what to do. The other side of top task is that it says transferring money is a top task. And then it measures and it says, well, 30% of people can't transfer money, and of those who can, it's taking them 3 minutes, and it should only take them 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And the idea is to continuously improve the top task. So a lot of organisations we deal with, as I'm sure you've found, still have the project culture of, oh no, we've got a transfer money process, we're not going to continuously improve it, because they don't measure customers' time. So the next element of top tasks is that you measure the top task, and you come back and you report, well, here's the success rate at 60%, and it's taken 3 minutes. And then the model is, how do we get the success rate up to 100%, and how do we get the 3 minutes down to 30 seconds?
Yeah.
So most organisations don't want to do that. They don't want to measure the actual customer experience as what they're doing. So these are the core challenges that we find in a lot of places.
Yeah. Have you found the application of top tasks? I know it's traditionally, tell me if I'm wrong here, I'm saying traditionally, like it's digital channel focused. Have you seen that applied across an omni-channel experience?
No, that's interesting, because what we've done, maybe in the early years, is what we did. But the way we frame it now, I did my first big project in Ireland in 5 years, even though I live here. I've had no customer here for 5 years with the Irish Department of Health, with HSE. And when we did the top tasks for them, the way we framed it was, in dealing with health, not your health, because we wanted to get to doctors and people looking after carers. And so in dealing with health, what really matters to you?
So look outward, inward.
So not digital, not physical.
Yeah.
So when we did it with Toyota, we said in buying a car, not even a Toyota car, not online, not offline.
Okay.
So we've moved away very much, because people don't understand offline and online. They don't say, I'm going to buy the car online today. They just say, I'm going to buy the car. So then they say, oh, I'll check that, then I'll maybe go to a deal. So customers don't think in channels. You know, they may use channels, but they don't think in channels.
Yeah.
Right. So we frame it agnostic.
Right. Okay.
So we try and, in choosing a university, so we collect tasks that aren't even digitized yet. So how do you deal with your health? So we try and define the whole treatment, post-treatment, pre-treatment, anything that could be connected with choosing a university, buying a car, in working for Tetra Pak.
Yeah.
You know, what's most important to you on a day-to-day basis, in working for the BBC, in building an engine for Rolls-Royce.
Yeah.
So we try and make it agnostic, and then you look at the map that comes back and you say, you know, digital can deal with this, physical, and sometimes it's a mix of things. So top tasks ideally is agnostic of any channel.
Do you have any insights in regards the behavioural differences between channels?
You know, what you'll see, I don't know if I pronounce his name, Luke Robrowski. He's a great guy. I really admire the work he does. But I was listening to him at an event apart there a couple of months ago, and he was saying that typical behaviour in a desktop or a laptop or whatever is about 20-30 interactions a day, about a minute to 2 minutes or some longer, whereas on your phone it's about 80 but 10 to 30 seconds.
Right.
So the type of behavioural interactions tend to be much shorter bursts.
Yeah.
You know, need to do this,
quick tasks.
Or quick little segments of a top task.
Yeah.
So you might be doing a short, just, what's the price? Or what's the, or where does it fly from? Or so you might be doing bump, 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 and then finishing it off somewhere else.
Yeah.
So you got these much more shorter. But then sometimes, because the channel, you might be reading up the details of your diagnosis at home on your smartphone before you go to bed. You know, there's these patterns that they show. The later at night, the smaller the device.
Yeah.
So the device doesn't necessarily mean on the move. It could be on the toilet, in the bed. You know. But then sometimes you'll see in hospital, because we've done quite a bit of health work over, that you're approaching the hospital. If it knew you were approaching the hospital, right, it could say, parking, how to find the place you need to go to. So there are all sorts of ways. And it comes down to, of course, trust as well. Will I allow you to know where I am?
Yeah.
You know, in the process. Knowing where you are rather then knowing what device you're using is the crucial aspect of
it's a different conversation.
Like if you're coming into a big conference, so you might have been checking on this, but they now know it's October 18th when the conference is on, so they now can know you're 30 miles from Dublin. Well, what are they going to tell you? Where are you going to get parking? Etc.
Where's the cheapest parking?
Where's the cheapest? This is service design.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not parking, it's the cheapest parking.
Exactly.
Most secure parking.
Exactly. And then how much of a walk is it to blah, blah, blah.
It's going to rain.
Well, we know that.
You forgot your umbrella.
But basically, it's about knowing people. And ultimately, people will, like they give trust to Amazon, say, you can use my, so ultimately trust will it'll come back again in an even bigger way, because we'll begin to realise the entities that are truly, right now we don't know that we're being exploited and our trust is being exploited. But it's all about having this deep, deep, deep understanding of the customer. And using it properly. You can get short-term gain by exploiting them, but long-term you can build tremendous businesses, as Amazon has shown, etc., by actually not treating people badly, by giving them a good price, by giving them a good service.
Are you happy to name any companies that you think are doing it badly?
Well, I think practically 80%, 80, 90%, all the banks, all the insurance companies, their whole business model is to exploit you. The longer you're with you, the worse they treat you. Most companies that I deal with, you want customer service from them, they outsource it, or, there's very few companies that really are customer obsessed.
Yeah, that's true. I've got one more question from Maish Nakani, who both of us actually quite know.
Great guy, Maish. He does great work.
Great guy, Maish. I met him at UX Australia last year, and he commented on the channel as well. And he wanted to ask you, what's the one thing an organisation must not get wrong when embarking on a digital transformation?
The one thing is that they must not get wrong is the customer. It's the customers you have, not the customers you don't have. And it's basically, they must not get wrong their understanding of the customer. So they must get right knowing the customer and understanding how they behave and how they think and where they want to click and what button, the true understanding of the actual customer. And I think the more they expose the organisation, the more people within the organisation that get exposed to the customer. So where I see things fail is where, there's a tiny group of people who actually get it or spend time with their customers. So they must spend time with their customers. They must invest
in the research.
Time. And research is too small a word almost. In actually, knowing and being around and exposing, like Google has developers. I remember the guy Tomer Sharon, and there's a great guy who says they'd Field Fridays where they'd bring the developers out just to meet and watch customers in small businesses, in garages and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
So the more they invest in truly understanding and developing empathy for their customers, if they get that right, everything else will fit into place.
Wow. Okay, that's fantastic advice. We're just going to move the conversation to a little bit more about Gerry McGovern himself. This is what we do towards the end of the interviews. And I'm keen to understand who inspires you and who do you look for a thought leader in this area?
Well, certainly the people that I've looked at, and we were talking about earlier, Jared Spool, Jacob Nielsen. There's a guy, Paul Taylor, in the UK that I think is good. There's a ton, I'm always reading stuff and in a way it's not fair. And I mentioned those in a way because so many years and they're embedded in my brain. But there's so many people, there's so much interesting stuff. It's a movement of Jerry Gaffney and yourself and, there's so many people. There's thousands and thousands. It's a kind of there's a shift. Every country, every place, there's a whole group of people that are really moving in this direction. We're at this pivotal moment. Which way do we want to go? Do we want to go the exploitative, treat customers like they're stupid, exploit the hell out of them, get as much data from them as possible? Do we want to partake in the dark arts, or do we want to go for the light and actually create fairer, better societies? I think these are no longer decisions of the so-called great men. we can have a say, every one of us. I think every one of us today has a responsibility to actually make the world a better place.
Absolutely. And that was actually a great way to end the conversation. But I'm going to continue for another 3 questions, because we'll move into the very final 3 questions. And it is, again, coming back to a little bit more about Gerry McGovern. What is the one professional skill that you wish you were better at?
Accounting.
That's like me as well.
Well, what I learned years ago with Noah when I had a consultancy and a group, I'm not a good manager. I mean, there's so many areas that I'm bad at, and probably what I'm best at is evangelism and stuff like that. And what I'm bad at is practically everything else,
I don't know about that.
No, but often we have things we're good at, and so many things that, I'm not a good man. I knew I was not good at managing people and building companies. So I've worked with a very loose network over the places. And I often realise, how blind I am. It's scary when you look at things and you go over stuff, and then you go over them again a day or 2 later and think, was that there?
Yeah.
And you miss it. So I realise all these blind spots I have, and I'm scared of them. So often for me to do something well, I have to go over something like 10 or 15 times to really get a sense of everything that's in the environment. If I'm throwing something almost straight immediate, I know I'm going to miss a lot of stuff. So I'm a very iterative type of thinker as well. I usually start off making a load of mistakes and then iterate my way through those mistakes. But I suppose the strength I have is I keep going.
Yeah, resilience, which is a huge trait.
Resilience, and generally reasonably open.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hopefully, wanting to keep that way.
Yeah, fantastic. So the second question is, what is the one thing in the industry that you wish you'd be able to banish?
The tribalism.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing is tribes within tribes within tribes. As the world becomes more complicated, we have to go into smaller silos in order to develop the skill set to actually do a decent job at anything, right? But to actually do the job, we need to work with multiple other groups, because the job is so complex. So we're finding, isn't it rare you find a multidisciplinary conference?
Yeah.
You have the service conference, the UX, you have the IA conferences, and we're all fighting each other, splitting hairs and over. So, if we could overcome our tribalism, our 3 million year old tribalism, which is the hardest thing we can overcome, and truly look outwards and look to work with people who are not like us, and often look to work with people who we initially have an instinctive dislike for, and say, oh, those people don't, because I do this, I'm just as much a tribal, my instinct is, oh, those horrible marketing, or those horrible developers, and actually, you not just have empathy for the customer, have empathy for people who are not like us in our discipline, and create bridges, and do a hell of a lot more bridging of disciplines.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. And the last question is, what is the message you'd give to emerging design talent for the future?
You're lucky.
Yeah.
This is an amazing time. There's extraordinary possibilities, but evidence.
Yeah.
You build evidence. Learn how to analyse evidence. Don't look to this gut instinct. Well, you haven't developed it yet, but be very careful about it, I think, because the gut is 3 million years old, in many ways. And I've seen so many instances of where the gut instinct is not right. Get the evidence and constantly iterate. Don't think of this idea of the design that's built to last. Think of the idea of the design that's built to change.
And that is an absolutely brilliant way to end the conversation. Gerry McGovern, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Gerry. Great conversation.
So there you have it. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you'd like to be part of the conversation or community, hop on over to thisishcd.com, where you can request to join the Slack channel and help shape future episodes and connect with other designers around the world. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.